do you anticipate 9/11 as that kind of a large turning point, a pivot point? Too early to say, I understand, but are there elements of it that suggest one answer or another to you about the importance of that historical moment in terms of transformation and pivoting of this society?
I will probably do what most historians would do here, which is an on the one hand, on the other hand. My yes answer to that is that yes, it is a pivot. It's a huge turning point in the sense that it completely reshaped our foreign policy. Our elections have been far more about foreign policy than they ever were in the 1990s, and they will continue to be in all likelihood. We are at war, in a prolonged war against terrorism, against Al-Qaeda, its allies, however one wants to name that enemy, for a very long time. And we don't know the end of that. It had a profound impact on America's image in the world, especially after the invasion of Iraq, which is, of course, deeply related to 9/11. It has no doubt had, like the Cold War had, if we could use that as a comparison. The Cold War lasted at least 40 years, 40-some years. The Cold War had a profound impact on domestic culture, on the way we thought about ourselves, on our cultural production, on filmmaking, on all kinds of metaphors that we said we were seeing the world through, this clear enemy and communism in the Soviet Union. We may live now a prolonged period of this war against a terrorist enemy that might last 40 years, who knows? And the impact on our domestic culture could be absolutely profound. Now, whether 9/11, my maybe or possible no answer would be, we don't know whether 9/11 is truly a Pearl Harbor or a Fort Sumter, or choose one or two others if you like, because we don't know its outcome. I mean, Pearl Harbor is easy to point to because it launched us into this all-out world war on two fronts, and it lasted 4 years. And it had a conclusive ending, did it ever? And it profoundly changed the world. So we look at Pearl Harbor and we say, here's the world it created.
This is the cartoon that
exactly
we talked about,
right.
And this is the Chuck Essay cartoon
yes.
that it came out right afterwards and showed the smoke coming out of the ships at Pearl Harbor and the smoke coming out of the site at Ground Zero. But
well, it's an inevitable analogy. We couldn't resist it, and I remember at the time I was collecting a lot of news articles and journalistic pieces at the time because I was fascinated with the analogies. We were all struggling for the right analogy. I was also struck at that time. In fact, to me, one of the legacies of this to keep tracing, whether it's for the cultural historian or for the journalist or for museums, is this idea of American innocence. If we go back to 9/11 and that fall and the following winter, perhaps for the full year afterward, there was article after article about how this event might indeed finally bring an end to this sense of collective innocence in America, that America is not vulnerable, that we always essentially win our wars, solve our problems, and we had been living a pretty easy time in terms of foreign policy in the 90s and so on. And I'm not so sure that 9/11 ended American innocence. I mean, American innocence is still alive and well in some ways. It grows in our culture like flowers in the spring. It grows among youth because they are raised to believe we are a society that solves all of its problems. And Americans do not like a tragic vision of themselves. We don't want to be the nation that has genuine tragedies, not just mishaps and catastrophes and wars and death and loss, but events that may come out of a history we actually helped create for ourselves, whether we knew we were doing it or not. There are good reasons that American culture breeds this sense of innocence, but it also makes us vulnerable to ourselves and vulnerable to history. And the sheer level of shock that we went through with this, unaware, frankly, that there was an Islamic ideology out there that had been targeting us for years and was trying to attack us. I mean, how could we have known? On the other hand, why didn't we? So I don't think 9/11 ended American innocence, although it may have ushered in, finally, a period of time, possibly even modes of teaching, certain kinds of writing and artistic creation that that makes us reflect on just what a global world we live in, every day in every way, global in commerce, but global politically, and that we are fools to ever think we can live behind our boundaries again, whether we're in central Kansas or New York City or Los Angeles.